Vancouver News. Pleading for help.
This is where I'm stuck of just living out of a tote.
2 years after landslides forced them from their homes, people in Chilliwack say they are still waiting for relief.
It's like dealing with
A major BC retailer says it may be forced to close some of its stores because of theft and violent crimes.
As the person left without the items, they pulled out a hatchet and struck that employee.
Some against staff. And from the Fraser to the ocean, what to do with abandoned boats in BC.
And everywhere we went, there was derelict vessels.
There are hundreds, and they pose risks.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A group of displaced Chilliwack residents says the province has not given them any support after landslides forced them from their homes. It happened 2 years ago when torrential rain and flooding inundated the Fraser Valley. As John Hernandez shows us, local officials say they desperately need help.
It makes you feel kind of helpless.
2 years ago, Irv Workington checked on his chickens as rains pounded his Chilliwack Lake Road property. He brought some eggs back into his house.
And about 2 minutes later, I heard a huge crash. And I went out to investigate, and the hillside had come down and completely buried my chicken house. Well, we're looking at where the damage came down. You can see up top there, that's where the slide started, about 100 feet up.
The slide didn't take out his house, but days later, the property was inspected by a district-appointed engineer.
He said to get out as quick as possible because impeding for the whole mountain to come down.
Workington is one of 6 property owners in the Chilliwack River Valley whose properties have been deemed unsafe and unlivable following the historic atmospheric river. None have received insurance payouts or disaster relief from the government.
I'm stuck of just living out of a tote and just waiting for the government to do something.
BC assessment on my property, $1 for the house, $1 for the acre of land, total value $2.
Richard Holmes and Mary Lee Murr's house is off its foundation. Calls for provincial help denied or unanswered.
It's like dealing with a black hole. A lot of my emails were not even acknowledged.
District leaders have been advocating for provincial buyouts.
It's been too long. It's 2 years almost. These people are taxpayers. They're salt of the earth residents. They need to have some resolution here.
The province says, unlike floods, landslides aren't covered by its disaster relief policy, but it's not ruling out other potential funding.
I'm aware of these 6 individuals. We are in conversations with the district, and in addition to that, Minister Ma and I will be having further discussions with our colleagues.
Residents call it a vague promise heard time and time again.
It's like basically dangling a carrot in front of you all the time.
The district says it plans to keep up the fight, and legal action could be next. John Hernandez, CBC News, Chilliwack.
Dozens of people claim they've been left high and dry by a Surrey-based cleaning company. As Michelle Morton tells us, some clients and staff say they are still owed hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
So they clean the shower.
When Catherine Gamble realized her arthritis was preventing her from cleaning her home, she looked online for a company she could afford.
Scrubby kept sending emails and saying, we'd love to do business with you. Here's a discount for 1 or 2 cleanings.
The 66-year-old retiree says the cleaners did a great job and she renewed her plan in the spring. But a few weeks ago, she read a Facebook post that claimed Scrubby was not paying its employees.
Do a little bit of dusting.
She contacted Scrubby but didn't hear back. Then Gamble says nobody came for her scheduled cleaning last week.
If somebody had actually shown up, I would have given them whatever cash I had on me.
Gamble says she's out more than $650. CBC News went to Scrubby's office address listed on the Better Business Bureau's website in Surrey, but saw no signs of the company. Scrubby has not responded to numerous requests for an interview. The BBB says the company is unaccredited and believed to be shut down. Some former Scrubby employees say they're still owed wages. Kira Johnston says she started working with Scrubby in the spring to make ends meet while she faced some health challenges.
It was okay.
But in September, she says Scrubby told her her paycheck would be late.
I am still kind of catching up on my financial situation due to my health reasons. So it was definitely pretty hard.
Johnston says she's owed about $500. She's part of a Facebook group called Unpaid Scrubby Workers Unite, which has around 150 members across Canada. Some have been considering their legal options.
I know some of them have been on the notice of eviction, and some can't even pay to feed their families, which is just heartbreaking.
The Better Business Bureau says if you used a credit card to pay for a service you did not receive, contact your card company to see if you can get the charges reversed. And if you're owed a lot of money, you may want to hire a lawyer. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A big BC retailer says it may have to close some of its stores. London Drugs says it is facing a rash of thefts and violent crimes, some of them against its own employees. Michelle Gassoub has more.
London Drugs says it's losing millions of dollars a year in stolen merchandise, but the retailer is even more concerned about a rise in violent incidents towards staff. The stories are harrowing.
The employee approached the individual and convinced the individual that they should maybe pay for those items or leave them behind. And as the person left without the items, they pulled out a hatchet and struck that employee.
London Drugs employees are trained to try and de-escalate situations with shoplifters before they call police.
One of the things that maybe people don't understand is it's not in our best interest to arrest somebody or trigger the justice system. We're trying to stop it from happening in the first place and prevent it.
But with violent incidents involving hatchets, knives, and even guns increasing, that training isn't enough to keep employees safe.
We have to look at the hard realities of closing stores in certain markets because the theft, but more importantly, the threat of violence. Our employees just don't want to work in certain downtowns, downtown Nanaimo, downtown Kamloops, downtown Vancouver.
It's difficult to quantify just how many incidents of theft there are in a given year. Data compiled by the Vancouver Police Department shows a slight decrease in theft since 2020, but because they're often not reported, there's concern it may just be the tip of the iceberg.
I share the frustration of these businesses.
Premier David Eby says a crackdown on repeat violent offenders is needed.
When people who are involved in a cycle of violence or repeat offenses are released again and again, and without any opportunity to intervene and break that cycle.
A bill that would make it more difficult for those offenders to be released is currently in front of the Canadian Senate. For now, concerns around staff safety at London Drugs remain. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A 25-year-old man has now been charged after a deadly crash in Surrey that killed a mother walking with her two children in 2020. The Crown says Geo Kurian has been charged with one count of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing death. Police say an unoccupied cargo van rolled into traffic, hit another car, then went onto a sidewalk and hit the mother. The victim's widow filed a lawsuit alleging the van was parked illegally with the handbrake off. The accused will have his first court appearance at the end of the month. Meanwhile, a BC man who murdered his pregnant wife 17 years ago has now been granted full parole. The Parole Board of Canada says Mukhtiar Pangali had made, quote, positive progress during his sentence and has taken responsibility for his actions. The 51-year-old was serving a life sentence after he was convicted of second-degree murder in 2007 for strangling his wife Manjeet and burning her body. He must now follow a treatment plan about domestic violence and not have any contact with her family. Premier David Eby says he is open to talking money with the city of Surrey, but he adds that city must move away from the RCMP as its police force as directed. Emily Vance says more on the war of words and the potential legal fight between Surrey and the BC government.
Premier David Eby is urging the City of Surrey to complete its transition from the RCMP to the Surrey Police Service. He says the change is no longer up for discussion.
It is very clear that the city will not be successful in any legal challenge. It is a waste of taxpayer dollars. The province is going in this direction. So let's sit down, let's move forward.
The province introduced legislation yesterday to give it the power to force the move. Eby says he understands the city's concerns about the cost of implementing a new force, but that any more delays will only make the process more expensive. He says money is available to support Surrey's transition.
We will support them. We understand there are additional costs here. We will support them in that, and I'm happy to have those discussions with Surrey.
Last Friday, the City of Surrey announced a legal challenge, arguing the province didn't have the jurisdiction to make the decision. BC United MLA Peter Millibar says the province is bringing sledgehammer legislation with little transparency.
What is the true cost of the plan that the province wants to see implemented in Surrey versus what the status quo would have been?
Surrey says it will face a shortfall of $314 million over 10 years if it moves to the SPS. And Mayor Brenda Locke says she's determined to stop the process. The province previously offered $150 million to help aid the transition. Emily Vance, CBC News, Victoria.
Most of them are vessels that have sailed their last voyage, and there are hundreds of them. Derelict, wrecked, and abandoned boats litter BC's coast from Vancouver Island to the Fraser River. Lindsay Duncombe has more now on the problem plaguing our waters and the risks they pose.
Slowly, carefully, the cowboy is hoisted off this Vancouver Island beach. One less abandoned boat in a province full of them.
That's it, the final voyage for that boat has been completed. Yeah.
The cowboy's last ride.
Finding, dismantling, recycling, and disposing of deserted vessels is dangerous technical work. That's fiberglass left in or near the ocean. It would pollute the water and the fish that live in it. The goal here, recycle anything salvageable, send the rest to the landfill.
How big of a problem is this?
It's big everywhere. Like we've done surveys around the whole island, and everywhere we went, there was derelict vessels. It's a huge problem.
Joshua Charlson is with BC's Coastal Restoration Society. He works with communities and First Nations on Vancouver Island. This summer and fall, the society will dispose of about 30 abandoned boats, funded by grants from provincial and federal governments.
Given what you know about how many derelict boats are out there, how many summers could you keep doing this?
I want to say we can hopefully get it done in my generation because I have 3 young kids, but it's going to take education, it's going to take policy change, it's going to take a willingness for people to change their habits of abandoning boats on shoreline in the first place.
Right, welcome aboard.
The team looks for boats onshore and underwater.
So you see like the nose of the boat?
Yeah.
So that's like
Sonar helps them detect abandoned boats below the surface.
Oh yeah, and you can see it there.
What do you think of when you see a boat like that sunk?
It's one of those things that it's really sad to see because you know all the leaching that's coming from the fiberglass and the metals and everything like that.
One of the big problems with abandoned boats is simply figuring out who owns them. You know, they might have a registration number on them, but the system isn't handled the way vehicle registrations are. In fact, the last person to officially own this boat may have sold it decades ago.
Whatever a man's aspirations, large or small, sail or power, he can realize his dreams off the coast of British Columbia.
The introduction of fiberglass in the 1950s set off a Canadian boating boom. Now those boats are reaching the end of their lives. Maintaining them, expensive. It's easier to ditch them than to fix them. Same goes for commercial boats.
When I grew up, it was nothing for me to see like an old commercial fisherman just go put his boat on the beach and then just leave it.
Disposing of an abandoned boat is expensive. Some can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Commercial ships cost millions. And no one is really counting all the boats just left behind. The Canadian Coast Guard's inventory lists 1,500 boats across the country.
How much of this exists across the province, do you think?
But Wesley and John Rowe, the father-son team behind BC's Dead Boats Disposal Society, figure there's far more than that. Thousands more in BC alone.
We pulled out about 250 boats in the last 5 years sort of thing, and we'll pull out a bunch more before we're done.
Then we have the picture there.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's an actual boat.
Yep.
They use drones and underwater cameras to find them here on the banks of the Alouette River near Vancouver.
How many boats would you say is in this area or are in this area that needs to be cleaned up?
About 9 to 12.
Yeah.
It saddens me in a lot of ways because our governments, our communities, we could be doing better and doing something about them.
But that's where it gets complicated. When it comes to what happens on water, 3 levels of government are involved. And Rowe says officials have a tendency to pass the buck.
It's not the municipal government, it's the federal government. It's not the federal government, it's the provincial government. It's
it is a
sun
big
god, I don't know.
ring around the rosy.
The society has had success. It recently convinced Transport Canada to clean up this section of the river.
It sounds to me like you're a bit of a thorn in the side of some of these officials, John.
A real bad one.
Some cleanups are happening. The Coast Guard dismantled and removed this rusty fishing vessel moored on the Fraser River for 6 years. It cost more than $3 million.
Canada's Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act is here to help.
And the laws have changed. In 2019, the federal government made it illegal to abandon a boat, punishable with fines up to $50,000. Although since the law passed, only 1 fine has been issued.
It's almost unsolvable, the way that we're set up at the moment. And where should we start?
Let's start by getting on the boat.
Yeah, okay. One hand for the boat at all times, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Michael Simmons is with the Saanich Inlet Protection Society. For 10 years, he's been working on the problem of abandoned boats, moored here in Brentwood Bay near Victoria.
How much progress have you made?
We've had 1 boat removed from here that we under the Wrecked, Abandoned and Hazardous Vessels Act. It took, I think, 3 years when we first asked for it to be attended to before it was actually removed. That was removed in February this year.
So you have had 1 boat removed in more than a decade of trying to work with this problem. Is that success?
Well, it's better than nothing. What can I say? I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's serious. It's awful, actually. This is the English Rose, the blue boat here.
I think the bloom is off the English Rose.
You're right.
So what about Piccadilly?
Well, it's been here a very long time. It's been in sad shape for a long time, even though it's a really nice boat originally.
Boats may look abandoned, but in order to qualify for removal under the law, there has to be proof no one has visited the vessel for 2 years.
And how would you know? Like, who's checking?
It's impossible to prove.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
So what beach is this?
Shell Beach.
Shell Beach.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There's the Staminas Reservation.
Yeah.
Back near Ladysmith, another beach, another boat.
So what do we know about this boat?
There'll be leg oil in there for sure. There might be some residual gas.
Is that the last one then? These 2 are out.
He says there's enough work to build an entire boat disposal industry.
We have so much work ahead of us that it's going to be decades of work just to deal with what we've identified so far.
Disposal takes time and effort. It will be tugged to a different location where it will be torn apart and disposed of. One problem solved, with so many more to go. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, near Ladysmith, British Columbia.
A haircut can mark a new beginning. Exhibit A. For Eddie the alpaca, though, it was literally a weight off his back. His owner brought him to the Tapin Llama Sanctuary just outside Kamloops, so overgrown he couldn't walk. So shelter workers had to use scissors to remove 30 pounds of matted hair. Have a look.
He was very dirty and disheveled, so we could see that there was some care needed. But when I actually got to him, the fleece was all the way down to the ground, so you couldn't see his feet. But he was extremely gentle and kind as he just sat himself down, and Lynn sat on one side and I sat on the other, and we used scissors. It was very satisfying that he obviously appreciated it. And once we'd got the main weight of his back, he stood up, and we could then see the extent of the problems.
And you and I thought we needed haircuts, Darius.
Yeah, was that a hint, putting that right before me?
Nothing. You look great. I was the one that wasn't looking great, just like Eddie.
Yeah, me
Yikes.
too. That's
Yeah.
okay. We got haircuts.
Thank goodness.
It's all
eh?
good.
Yeah, amazing. We're adults. Well, let's not go that far. What's going on in the weather?
Let's look at the weather. Still got lots of warnings in place, much less fun than looking at alpacas. Wind warnings that are in place are going to come down tonight, more than likely. It seems like the wind will ease tomorrow in these areas, but rainfall still very much a concern. Over the last 24 hours, we saw a lot of rain make its way into the province, especially here on the south coast. Some of it breaking into the interior, but mainly here is the issue. Keep in mind, we don't have radar coverage for the North Island, so we did see rain there as well, just not nearly as much as the central part of Vancouver Island, where we saw most of the rainfall. A considerable amount, well over 50 millimeters of rain. We have to wait till tonight to get the final totals, but it was a lot. Over the next 24 hours, expect to see more rain make its way into the central part of Vancouver Island. 48 hours, that rain continues, but eases off a bit. Most of it seems to be coming over the next 24 hours. But if we zoom in, you can see some of these totals are extremely high, especially considering how much rain we've already gotten. That rainfall warning that warned for 200 millimeters for parts of central Vancouver Island looks like it is likely to come true. So be on the lookout for that. Here in Vancouver, we do continue to see rain right through the night, but it shouldn't be too much. Not anything like what they're seeing on the island. Probably just some showers.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Increases in the cost of living eased a little last month. The annual rate of inflation slowed to 3.8% in September after jumping to 4% in August. But as Philippe de Montigny reports, that is still going to keep interest rates high. Bad news for borrowers, especially those with low credit scores.
Between high grocery bills and soaring rent, Cesar Ramirez was already feeling squeezed. Then he had to send money to his mom in Mexico after she was in an accident.
She does have insurance, but it didn't cover everything that had to be covered in the surgeries, and it was a big amount.
The Toronto resident took out a personal loan, owing more than $22,000 at a whopping 29.9% interest rate.
I was feeling so overwhelmed. I felt like I had no escape from this. I felt like there was no way out.
He turned to credit counseling, and he's not alone.
We're in a cost of living crisis and a high cost of credit crisis, so it's growing exponentially.
But a signal now, inflation may be easing, down from 4% in August to 3.8% in September. That's largely thanks to slowing food inflation, lower airfares, and stabilizing prices of goods like cars and appliances. But that doesn't mean Canadians will see relief.
We're not seeing any give back from that previous inflation. So for a lot of Canadians, these prices are still going to feel very high.
While inflation is heading in the right direction, it's still nearly twice the Bank of Canada's 2% target. Now the big question, will it raise interest rates again next week or stay put? Most economists are expecting the central bank to hold its key rate at 5%. Little consolation for borrowers relying on high interest loans to stay afloat. Payday loans, for example, can run up to 400% annually.
They go to a high interest or payday lender just to bridge that gap for a month, and it's a treadmill that they really can't get off.
Ottawa promised to crack down on predatory lending in its latest budget, capping interest that can be charged as the cost of living crisis drags on. Philippe de Montigny, CBC News, Toronto.
A tough loss for northern BC. Some of the last local newspapers are closing down this week. We're going to speak with the managing editor of one of them live after the break. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. Day of the Dead celebrations are fast approaching, and this past weekend, dozens of people, young and old, learned more about the ancient tradition and its origins. Janella Hamilton stopped by a free event put on by a local Latin community, which they say is key to preserving their culture.
You don't cut this out here, the one we call. As a young girl in Sinaloa, Mexico, Carmen Keach says she grew up making papel picado, a decorative art form made by cutting elaborate designs into sheets of paper, used in celebrations across Latin America.
It's part of who we are.
She says the technique is adapted from an ancient tradition practiced by Aztecs, who would use bark as paper to decorate religious sculptures, shrines, and burials.
Papel picado symbolizes the wind, and it symbolizes how fragile is life, right? And symbolize joy.
Today, papel picado is used to adorn Day of the Dead altars to honor loved ones who've died.
For me, it's kind of healing, but they bring something so meaningful for me.
We need to make sure that our new generations, far from home, learning all the traditions and cultural things that we have back to home.
As part of the Latin American Heritage Month Festival, she and volunteers with Latin Vancouver are showing younger generations how to make the traditional Mexican craft.
My wife is Mexican, so we wanted them to learn about Mexican traditions. I think this is one of the most popular Mexican traditions.
I'm learning how to carve a pumpkin. They need to learn how to do this paper.
A piece of nostalgia for some who took part in Sunday's workshop. For others, it's a chance to learn about different cultures.
It's seldom to know about it in Hong Kong. Now it's hard to learn from Latin American culture.
I was more or less in touch with the Mexican culture. So I wanted to know a little bit more about this altar.
This community altar made up of photos and memorabilia of family and friends who have passed away, and paper flowers thought to guide the souls of the dead back to the living through their strong scent and bright colors.
They come in and bring the picture of the beloved one to share with us and light a candle.
Visitors to Granville Island can add to the altar until November 2nd, when the Day of the Dead ceremony will be held. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Northeastern BC is losing a primary source of local journalism. Glacier Media has announced it is shutting down both the Dawson Creek Mirror and Fort St. John's Alaska Highway News, with final editions being released this week. President Peter Kvarnström said running the newspapers, both the print and online editions, is no longer cost effective. For more on what this loss means and the legacy these papers will leave, Rob Brown joins us now. He's the managing editor of the Dawson Creek Mirror. Rob, first of all, hard time for you and your staff. How are you holding up?
Personally, not too bad. Some of the other staff a bit more anxious, certainly leading into, oddly enough, Friday the 13th. But certainly this week, we're moving out of the, as far as I'm concerned, the funeral of more than a combined 173 years of print journalism in North and South Peace, and moving on to greener pastures as far as the staff are concerned at both newspapers.
When you say greener pastures, are there opportunities for them still in journalism?
Well, again, I can't speak for some. I know some certainly have their irons in the fire, so to speak. But I'm certainly, this newspaper, this writer and managing editor is not going anywhere, and we're working on a new homegrown Dawson Creek, this week in Dawson Creek, new product that's going to be rolling out next week after the last edition of the Dawson Creek Mirror, certainly.
And will that be an online service or print or both?
It'll be a combination of multimedia, yeah. Certainly a small print to begin with, how we get going, and then obviously online video, podcast, and certainly more, and a daily morning news blast out as well, which is something from my past that I used to do back 20-odd years ago.
Yeah. This shutdown means more that 73,000 people or more living in Northeast BC will not have a targeted news service. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
I mean, it's sad. I mean, I've been working in this industry for 25 years this year, consistently, and it's brought me and certainly most of the papers I've been connected with, former and current, fantastic times. And it's just, you know, I can't disagree with Peter Kvarnström in any way. It's a business model that involves, once I finish the look and feel and direction and most of the content these days of these newspapers, I hit send, and it is then printed on a giant press, hundreds, sometimes more than 1,000 miles away, and then trucked back to us. And then we truck it out and we give it to children as well and others to deliver. I think that's a lot of overhead, and I can't disagree. But I think there's a more resilient and certainly more profitable way to do it after I hit print, so to speak.
No, the Dawson Creek Mirror was founded in 1930. What legacy does this paper leave, and do you have a highlight that you would leave people with?
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. Over the incarnation in the South Piece, between the Peace River Block News starting in Rolla and then relocating to Dawson, and then over the incarnations, over the many machinations of newspaper buyouts and more, the Dawson Creek Daily News, and then for the last 40 plus years, the Dawson Creek Mirror. You know, I personally, I have many, you know, photography with my daughter and more, and certainly personally, but you know, I just thank the company and certainly the Dawson Creek Mirror for, you know, taking a 16-year-old or 17-year career reporter and turning him into a managing editor of a few newspapers.
Rob Brown, the managing editor of Dawson Creek Mirror. Best to you and the staff.
Thank you very much.
Hundreds fear dead in Gaza after a hospital was hit by an airstrike. The source of that strike, though, is a big debate. That's next.
Well, it's a retailer's dream. Monday morning, 7:30, the 470-car parking lot at the new IKEA store is jam-packed full. There's cars up and down all the streets, and there's hundreds of people waiting to get in on opening day.
Right now.
Were you number one?
Yeah.
You were the first one in line?
Yeah.
And what did you win?
A dining room set, table and chairs.
So 5 o'clock Saturday morning, was it worth it?
Sure.
Why did you come here all night? I mean, why didn't you just come after it's open?
Well, because I got into line so that I thought I was going to get, you know, either a lamp or a chair or something, but I was late.
What did you get?
Potted plant.
A potted plant?
Tree, pine tree.
Was it worth the wait?
Oh, we've had a party all night. We've had a great time. We've all made some new friends.
Yeah, no
because
kidding.
we were sitting around and we're entertained. What else is there to do on a Sunday night?
Finally, 8 o'clock, and the doors open for the first customers in the new store. There's even a real live royal couple on hand to celebrate the opening, a prince and princess from Sweden. For the kids, there's a new and improved ballroom. There's even a restaurant at the new IKEA, featuring such Swedish delights as meatballs, spiced salmon, and herring with onions. Not exactly breakfast food. You've got to hand it to their marketing department. When was the last time you've seen such a big hullabaloo for the opening of a furniture store? And it's not as if their prices are really low. In a very carefully worded announcement, IKEA says 19% of their prices have been reduced. That doesn't mean that their prices have been reduced by 19%. It means that they've cut the prices of 19% of their items. The actual price cuts could be only 1 or 2%. Well, it's certainly a day for Thanksgiving at IKEA. They're estimating that 20,000 people will come through the doors today, and 45% of them will actually spend money. One of the attractions today, of course, is all the prizes they're giving away. A free trip to Sweden, and this house back here. The catch is, you have to be here next Sunday afternoon if you've entered the draw and they draw your name and you want the house. You have to be here at IKEA. So if you think it was crowded today, wait till next Sunday.
Hamas and health officials in Gaza are blaming Israel for an airstrike on a hospital in Gaza City. They say 500 people may have been killed. The Israeli military says its intelligence indicates the hospital was hit by a rocket that was misfired from inside Gaza. The CBC's Chris Brown has the details from Jerusalem.
The scene at the Al Ahli Arab Hospital after the missile strike was utterly chaotic and awful. People rushed in to help survivors and pulled bodies out. Health authorities said hundreds may be dead, but it was not possible to confirm exact numbers. Starved of fuel, supplies, and water by Israel's blockade, hospitals in Gaza were already near collapse, but thousands of extra people may have been on the site, using it as a shelter. British Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta was there when the missile struck.
Certainly the operating suite, the part of the roof has fallen. There's broken glass everywhere. There are lots of people who are taking refuge in the hospital. There are people moving in the corridors. Okay, I need to go.
A video verified by the New York Times appears to show the moment of impact, along with the sound of the incoming missile. But Israeli officials said they did not fire it and blamed another militant group, Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
We did not strike that, and that the intelligence that we have suggests that it was a failed rocket launch by the Islamic Jihad.
But Hamas blamed Israel. Palestinian leaders in the occupied West Bank called it an act of genocide, and Iran called it a savage war crime. Even before the hospital was struck, it had already been one of the deadliest days of the 11-day-old war in Gaza. Israeli missiles had destroyed buildings in the southern city of Rafah and in a refugee camp in the north of Gaza. People there tried to pull survivors out of the rubble with their bare hands. These are children and young people. Why don't they kill the targeted person and not the children, she said. With thousands dead, people are being buried en masse. Here, a family of 11. The hospital attack, whoever is responsible, is feeling like a pivotal moment, however, exacerbating an intensely combustible situation between Israel and its neighbors. In Jordan, an angry crowd tried to barge into Israel's embassy, and in the occupied West Bank, furious crowds took to the streets. All this as U.S. President Joe Biden makes his way to Israel for an extraordinary wartime visit.
The CBC's Chris Brown reporting from Jerusalem. Family members of Hamas hostages are fighting through their anguish, saying the release of their loved ones must be the top priority. Margaret Evans now with their emotional pleas.
In Tel Aviv, people pin their hopes up on a wall outside Israel's Ministry of Defense. Pictures of the missing, or those feared taken hostage by Hamas. Their message to the government is simple: don't forget our people in this war, bring them back alive. Avichai Brodich, whose wife and 3 children are missing, says it must be the primary concern.
You think about me first and about all the families around me, you know, and it should be just such an obvious thing around the world that families are first.
He began his vigil alone to manage his anguish. He's since been joined by many more, anxious to keep their loved ones in the public eye.
I decided I had to do something, so this was the best thing I could think of. Come to the Ministry of Defense, you know, where the decisions are being made. Took a chair with me, sat down with my dog.
Allahu Akbar! In the chaos of Hamas's brutal attack, many people were rounded up by militants, some of it caught on videotape. A neighbor reported seeing Brodich's family being taken from their kibbutz. His brother Aaron, a Canadian from Toronto here to help, says it was a relief that they'd first thought they'd been killed.
It's like the worst news you can think of in the world. For us, it was great news and hope, yeah.
But Rami Igra, a former Israeli intelligence officer, warns hope is a tenuous thing, especially now.
People are going to hurt, and let's hope that we get as many as we can out of there. But it is a forceful rescue. There's not going to be any kind of negotiations between us and the Hamas, where on the other side we release prisoners.
On Monday, Hamas released a video of a young Israeli woman who identified herself as Mia Shem, asking to be returned to her family. It's not clear when it was filmed or what her condition is. Her mother held an emotional press conference.
I didn't know she's dead or alive until yesterday. All I knew is that she might be kidnapped. I'm begging the world to bring my baby back home.
Igra says there will certainly be more hostage videos to come.
They want the Israeli sentiment, the Israeli public, to start influencing the Israeli government to go into negotiations. This is not going to happen this time, but they will try their best.
Asked if he has advice for the families, he says no advice, only sympathy. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Tel Aviv.
India's top court has refused to legalize same-sex marriage. That decision follows more than a dozen petitions and weeks of arguments earlier this year. As Salima Shivji reports, many activists and same-sex couples are disappointed and plan to keep fighting.
As members of the media waited for a potentially landmark decision on marriage equality, petitioners like this couple filled with nervous anticipation.
Hopeful, then heartbroken, then really heartbroken.
Her hope soured as the judgment was read out. India's highest court was rejecting gay marriage, even as the judges expressed sympathy and a willingness to bolster LGBTQ rights. Heading into this fight, longtime couple Abhay Dang and Supriyo Chakraborty just wanted their wedding to be more than symbolic. Now, there's only dismay.
You get tired that you've been fighting for this for so long, and now you've won nothing. You're back to like where you were.
The 5-judge bench disagreed on whether to extend adoption rights to same-sex couples, but they were unanimous on the main point.
That the court doesn't have the power to alter India's Marriage Act to legalize same-sex marriage. That's up to Parliament, they say.
But that doesn't comfort many here.
That Parliament always lacked the will to legislate on this aspect. So leaving it to the Parliament, it'll be a long wait.
Especially since the Indian government argued those demanding marriage equality were just urban elites. The court scoffed at that notion, but many maintain the socially conservative country just isn't ready to accept same-sex unions.
But we can't allow the same-sex marriage, being India, an ancient country, ancient culture.
Fighting that thinking is still the plan for many here.
It's not an overnight thing. We need to come back. We need to fight for our equal rights.
There is not a single country in the world where LGBTQ rights were handed on a platter.
India no different, he says. He's still hopeful that one day same-sex marriage will be legal in his country. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
About 1 in 5 Canadians will develop a problem with drinking in their lifetime. Why the help to break the bind of booze is often so hard to find. After this.
This weekend, many restaurants put their patio tables and chairs back into storage, with Patio officially wrapping up for another year. Today, Mayor Chow admitted the program had some issues this year.
I own every one that have applied the Patio program, and apology. It was a bit messy. It's on behalf of the city. Sorry about that.
The program transitioned from a pilot project to a permanent installation this year. Restaurant and bar owners were required to get permits to take part, but the approval process was slow.
They were still dropping the concrete embankments, well into the summer.
David Adji owns Booth by Adji on Dundas Street West. He applied for a Patio permit this year, but decided against it because it took too long to get approval from the city. Many of the 335 restaurants and bars that did get permits missed both the May 4 and July 1st holiday weekends because of delays.
You saw people still building all throughout July. Some patios opened up the first week of August. Like, talk about a small window to actually capture your business.
Today, the mayor promised that won't be the case next year.
For those of you that already have a Patio program and have everything set up, we're going to give you an approval. Not next year. By end of November. November 30th, you will know that you have the approval for next year.
The city says it's also going to be easier for restaurant owners who weren't a part of the Patio program this year but want to get a permit to open a patio in 2024.
For a new restaurant joining the Patio program in 2024, we're going to open up the application mid-January. So we're not going to wait.
The mayor says they hope to have the majority of applications approved by mid-April. Adji says if that's the case, he'll consider giving Patio another shot.
But then you've got to have that patio built and ready to go for that first warm weekend in May, not July.
Chow says the plan is to have city staff setting up safety barriers no later than May 1st.
We're going to make sure patio are ready and open at the latest for the Victoria Day weekend.
According to a city-funded study, the program generated more than $200 million in economic benefits in 2022. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Every year, a museum in the United States chooses new additions for its Toy Hall of Fame. This year, though, to mark its 25th anniversary, it's doing something a bit different. It's asking the public to make one of the selections by choosing 5 toys that have been finalists for many years and never got selected. Among the toys that haven't gotten a nod for the Hall of Fame are Transformers, more than meets the eye in the 80s and 90s. Come on. Neither have Pez dispensers, if you can believe it, around since the 1940s. Meanwhile, ye old pogo stick has been bouncing around since the early 20th century. Believe it or not, Fisher-Price's Corn Popper made its debut in 1957, and My Little Pony was first introduced in the early 80s. If you have a favorite, you can head to the Museum of Play website and vote until October 24th to put one of those classics into the Toy Hall of Fame. Darius Madavi, which one would you put in?
I think the pogo stick.
Okay, good choice. Classic.
I know. I have a pogo stick by my desk. I don't know why. I think Johanna left it.
So you're the one that's making all that noise in the newsroom. Thanks, pal.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Is the weather making a lot of noise?
Yeah, and you don't want to be pogoing right now.
No.
Wind's still very high, but those coming down when that wind warning does by tonight. Tomorrow morning, still quite a bit of wind, but then it does calm down quite a bit. It's not unusual for the area to be very windy, but this is sort of above and beyond even that. But those winds calming as our sort of atmospheric river begins to calm down. Speaking of which, this is what we're looking at. So this is 2 days ago, 48 hours ago. You see that first bit of that river. This is what brought us some moisture Sunday night. And then you see this arm of it make its way here to Vancouver and hit just about now. So that rain, or hit earlier this afternoon, really, for the west coast of the island. So that's what started to bring that rain. It's going to continue feeding in until around Thursday, and then it starts to move south. And then Thursday, as it moves south, pretty much 48 hours from now, that's when it starts to retreat back. And that means more or less the end of the significant rain, although this weekend another system might start to move in, bringing even more of that precipitation. But for now, that's going to be the majority of what we're seeing. So those systems, as they start to move through, this is one of our models. Now, the models do differ quite a bit in terms of what's going to happen over the next 48 hours, especially during the day tomorrow. Unclear when exactly that rain is going to come, but it was correct in thinking that the rain is quite significant for the island right now. That's going to continue passing through. Now, even this model, which is one of the heavier ones in terms of the rain we get here in Vancouver, does have some breaks for us on the lower mainland. That's going to continue blowing through, though. And yeah, quite significant rainfall. We're looking here in Vancouver at probably 20 millimeters or so tomorrow, especially on the North Shore, probably a bit lower in other places. Now, that means that for the rest of BC, we're looking at, again, significant rainfall for the coast. Some of those showers breaking into the interior, but these are all chances of precipitation, by no means guaranteed, and somewhat sunny skies for parts of central and northern BC where we're not likely to see that rain. Prince George also, small chance, not really too much significant. And then we see those showers continuing here in Vancouver Thursday and Friday, very much up in the air, probably some Thursday morning, but other than that, it's hard to say.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
A Health Canada survey suggests almost 20% of Canadians will experience alcohol use disorder in their lifetime. While effective treatments do exist, many people aren't getting the help they need. As Tashana Reid tells us, new Canadian guidelines hope to change that.
It's no secret, experts say, Canada has a drinking problem and treatment is failing.
95 to 99% of Canadians do not get effective medications for the treatment of craving for alcohol or medications that can help prevent a relapse.
Now, for the first time, guidelines for Canadian doctors on treating alcohol use disorder, which is the ongoing use or difficulty controlling drinking despite consequences. It includes a list of questions doctors should routinely be asking patients, like do you spend a lot of time drinking or recovering from drinking? And the most effective drug treatments for withdrawal or ongoing care, but also what to avoid.
In some patients, we actually see an increase in alcohol use as a result of antidepressant medication.
There's also a caution around prescribing antidepressants known as SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, for alcohol use disorder. When mixed with alcohol, these medications may cause some people to drink even more.
Most people don't necessarily think of alcohol as a drug in the sense of interacting with other drugs.
That's what happened to Lynn. Her case highlighted in the Canadian Medical Association Journal.
Started drinking more, started drinking earlier.
CBC News has agreed to not identify Lynn as she fears stigma around alcohol addiction could harm her business. During the pandemic, she was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Her doctor prescribed an SSRI antidepressant, but she was also using alcohol.
As I was increasing my dosage, I was also increasing my alcohol consumption.
Lynn checked herself into a detox program and is nearly 1 year sober.
Don't be scared to make that first step.
Experts say they hope this new guidance will help doctors better identify people who need help and get them the care they need sooner. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, it's like soccer, but faster. We'll tell you how a new sport is starting to kick off in BC right after this.
Sugar, fruits, sometimes they put gelatin in it.
All of that, los beers.
We're Bags and Ranks, and we're playing Jam or Not a Jam. My girlfriend hates it.
She hates that song?
Yeah, I love it. I play it very loud in my car.
It's a big record.
I really love the new direction that she took.
I think I love it too.
Yeah? You know, we've been talking about doing some covers lately for some of our artists.
Yeah, and it's definitely...
That came out on the list.
Yeah, for Cassidy, for sure.
Yes, sir. Sick. Jam.
Baby, calm down. Yo, this your body, it puts in my heart for lockdown.
And I think, you know what? I think it's the first song of an Afrobeat artist to like be that high.
Massive, yeah.
I think it's number 5 on the Billboard US, or it peaked at number 4 or something like that. I mean, it's a jam, right? It's a jam, but
it's half peanut butter, half jam. I love Rema, but it's not a jam for me.
I mean, it's not my favorite song from Rema for sure. I mean, Do Maybe was literally one of my top ones. So yeah, it's a jam. Yeah, let's say it's a jam. I still think it's a big record. I mean, I understand why it blew up, but it doesn't speak to me as much as some of his other records that are less popular. how to say that.
Of course, it's that chord progression.
I can see the way, I see the way you look at me.
This is not. It's okay. It sounds like something in a teenage girl movie.
And I can understand why it could work.
Yeah.
Shout out though, who's singing this?
Oh!
Banks and Rings dissing Avril Lavigne on CBC Music. Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, shout out Avril Lavigne for sure. This is just not the type of music I listen to on the daily. I respect the craft though. Not my type of drugs.
I need a one dance.
Can we agree that this is a jam?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I need a one dance. Got a Hennessy in my hand.
The actual singer on that, baby, I like your style. We worked with her in the UK.
Kyla.
We're there in the studio with her right after that song happened. She wasn't in the music business anymore. Drake's team reached out and were like, you have till Monday to accept this deal. We're gonna clear the publishing on the record.
She thought it was a joke, right?
And then it went so fast, and they were actually really fair on clearing the publishing, and literally it changed her whole life.
Oh yeah.
It was just crazy, and it's one of those stories that you hear in movies, and you're just like, Drake came with the blessings, you know, the King Drake.
I had to bust up the silence.
Jam, of course, jam. I mean, #1 Billboard worldwide jam. If you hear that, you know, and I do, you just put that sound, you know what I mean? And you can cut it and do your thing at the edits at the beginning. You know?
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate the achievements and resilience of women in the workforce with CBC's Michelle Elliott on November 21st at the annual Dress for Success Luncheon. Get tickets and learn more at successluncheon.ca. And stay on top of what's happening where you live with our weekly newsletter. Subscribe today for special programming series, events, and contests at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox.
Think of soccer, but even faster. The sport is called futsal. While it's popular around the world, especially in Latin America, the sport's growth here in BC has been a bit slow. But thanks to the efforts of some dedicated organizers, futsal is starting to kick off.
Futsal has been a game for us, for South Americans, since we are very little. I started playing futsal when I was 6 years old.
We play, as you can see, in a very much a confined small area. It's 5 versus 5, so the players get a lot more touches, a lot more dribbles, a lot more decisions, and a lot more mistakes that you can correct. And the graphs show that they get 5 times the touches, which is a huge part of development. In Latin America, it's very prominent how they use futsal to develop soccer players. So we're very much in its infancy in BC, but it's starting to pick up, for sure.
It was quite hard to find, so I've been living here in BC for quite a while. It's been about 7-8 years now. They finally were able to come up with this league. It feels amazing, honestly. So not just for the Latin community, but for the whole BC community, I would say.
I was playing professionally in Iran. I was playing in Premier League for 5 years. And after that, I came to Canada and studied business. In futsal, the speed of the game, the pace of the game is super high. And then every moment of the game, there is a chance to get a score or a score against the other team. I remember like 4 years ago when I came here, futsal was not that big deal here, in Vancouver at least. But now I see so many good players, good organizers, and now BC Soccer is supporting futsal, which is a good news for us.
We would love the soccer community to recognize the importance of futsal to really the overall development of soccer. I mean, with Canada's market growing in soccer, with us hosting the World Cup in the future, this should be like a really ingrained part of the DNA of the soccer psyche in British Columbia and Canada as a whole.
I have that dream to play in National League, or maybe even in future for the national team. Who knows?
Cool. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Have a good night.